The observation deck of the Zenith Dawn hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship traversing the void between stars. Arya stood before the viewport, her reflection ghost-like against the cosmic tapestry beyond. 3 months into deep space reconnaissance, and the silence still felt like a living thing pressing against her eardrums. She was the only human aboard, a deliberate choice by the Galactic Collective. Humanity's application for membership had been met with the usual skepticism. Too aggressive, the Valkyrie delegates had argued. Too emotional, the logical Cynthians had calculated. Too unpredictable, everyone else had agreed. So here she was, a test subject in all but name, proving that humans could coexist with the dozens of species that made up the collective's crew. The soft whimper cut through her thoughts like a blade through silk. Arya turned sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for the emergency communicator at her belt. The corridor outside the observation deck stretched empty in both directions, its bioluminescent panels casting everything in shades of blue and violet. She listened, heart rate elevating as her training kicked in. The ship's artificial gravity hummed steadily beneath her feet. There it was again, a tiny, pained sound that made something primal twist in her chest. She moved into the corridor, following the noise. The Zenith Dawn was home to 17 different species, each with their own quarters, customs, and communication methods. In 3 months, Arya had learned to navigate this maze of cultures with careful diplomacy. She'd shared meals with the crystalline Shardborn, debated philosophy with the scholarly erudites, and even learned basic sign language from the telepathic whispers. But she'd never heard a sound quite like this. The whimper grew louder as she rounded a corner, and Arya froze as a cub limped toward her down the corridor. No larger than a housecat from Earth, but decidedly feline in appearance. Its fur shimmered with an iridescent quality that shifted between gold and deep amber in the corridor's light. One of its front legs was held at an awkward angle, and a thin trail of bioluminescent blood marked its path that Arya's breath caught. She recognized the species instantly, Leonari, one of the collective's most respected warrior races. Adults stood nearly 8 feet tall, with retractable claws capable of rending steel, and a culture built on honor, strength, and pride. And this was a child. A hurt child, the cub, Kovu, she remembered from the ship's manifest, stopped a few meters away, his large golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that belied his small frame. His whiskers trembled with each labored breath, but it wasn't just Kovu that made Arya's pulse quicken. Behind him, emerging from alcoves and doorways like shadows gaining substance, came the others. Adult Leonari, their massive forms moving with predatory grace. Arya counted 5, then 7, then 10. They formed a loose semicircle behind the injured cub, their expressions unreadable, their postures alert, silent. Watching, waiting. Arya had read the briefings. Leonari cubs were sacred, protected by the entire pride with a ferocity that had sparked wars. To harm a cub was to invite the wrath of an entire clan. To approach one without permission was considered a hostile act. And yet here was Kovu, limping toward her, while his protectors held their ground. This was a test. Arya understood that with crystal clarity. The collective was watching through 100 hidden sensors. The Leonari were watching with eyes that could track a heartbeat from across a room. Everyone wanted to see what the human would do when confronted with a vulnerable alien child and the terrifying guardians who would tear her apart if she made the wrong move. Arya slowly lowered herself to one knee, making herself smaller, less threatening. She kept her hands visible, palms up. "Hey there, little one," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle cadence she'd use with any frightened creature. "That looks like it hurts." Kovu took another halting step forward. Behind him, one of the larger Leonari, his father, perhaps, rumbled deep in his chest. A warning, but not a prohibition. Arya's mind raced. She had basic medical training, but Leonari physiology was complex. Their bone density was 3 times that of humans, their pain receptors distributed differently. What would help a human child might harm an alien one. And yet, looking into Kovu's eyes, she saw something universal: fear, pain, and a desperate plea for comfort. "I'm going to move my hand toward my belt," Arya announced, speaking to both Kovu and his escort. "I have a medical scanner. Just a scanner. I want to see how badly you're hurt." She moved with deliberate slowness, withdrawing the small device from her utility belt. The Leonari tensed, muscles coiling like springs. Arya kept her movements smooth, predictable, and held the scanner where everyone could see it before activating the diagnostic beam. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a hairline fracture in Kovu's front left radius. Painful, but not life-threatening. The bioluminescent blood was from a superficial cut, already beginning to clot. Fractured bone, Arya said, still speaking in that calm, steady voice. And a cut that's not too deep. You'll be okay, brave one. Kovu whimpered again, and something in that sound bypassed every logical thought in Arya's brain. She'd been trained for diplomatic incidents, for potential conflicts, for maintaining appropriate boundaries with alien species, but she hadn't been trained to ignore a child's pain. "May I?" she asked, directing the question to the silent escort. The largest Leonari, his mane a cascade of silver and black, stepped forward. His eyes locked with Arya's, and in that gaze she saw centuries of warrior tradition, of pride and protocol, of tests passed and failed. Then, slowly, he inclined his head, permission granted. Arya opened her emergency medical kit, withdrawing a universal stabilization brace. It was designed to adapt to different physiologies, its smart material adjusting to provide support without restricting blood flow. She'd never used it on a Leonari before, but the principles should hold. "This might feel strange," she told Kovu, "but it'll help the pain." She worked quickly but gently, fitting the brace around the cub's injured leg. Kovu flinched once, but held still, his eyes never leaving her face. The brace activated, conforming to his limb, and Arya saw the immediate relief in his posture. "There," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "Better." Kovu tested his weight on the leg, finding the support adequate. Then, in a gesture that froze every Leonari in the corridor, he limped the final distance and pressed his head against Arya's knee. A purr, soft and rumbling, vibrated through the contact. The silence that followed was absolute. Arya understood the magnitude of the moment. In Leonari culture, such a gesture was reserved for family, for those who had earned absolute trust. A cub did not give affection lightly, and for one to do so to an outsider, an alien, a human, the silver-maned Leonari approached, and Arya forced herself to remain still, to keep her hands steady on Kovu's head. The warrior towered over her, a being that could end her life with a single swipe of his claws. He knelt, bringing himself to her level, and placed one massive paw over his heart. "You honor our cub with kindness," he said, his voice a resonant bass that carried the weight of sincerity. "You honor our pride with courage. The Leonari see you, human. We see you truly." Behind him, the other warriors repeated the gesture, paws over hearts. Arya felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. "He needed help," she said simply. "Any decent being would have done the same." "No," the silver-maned warrior replied. "Many would have seen only the test. They would have calculated risk, measured consequence, weighed protocol. You saw only a child in pain." He stood, his expression solemn. "The collective debates whether humanity deserves a place among the stars. The Leonari have made their decision." 2 weeks later, when the Zenith Dawn returned to the collective's central station, Arya's report was just one of dozens submitted about humanity's trial period. The Valkyrie remained skeptical. The Cynthians requested more data, but the Leonari, one of the collective's most influential warrior clans, cast their vote with absolute certainty. Humanity, they declared, belonged among the stars, not because of human strength or technology or strategic value, but because when Arya heard a soft whimper in the hall, when she saw a cub named Kovu limping toward her while his protectors formed a silent escort, she had done what so many civilized species had failed to do. She had simply cared. And sometimes, in the vast cold of space, that was the most powerful force of all.